Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Tuesday, August 4th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. A first in San Diego County as one city council votes to take aim at those violating COVID-19 health orders. City leaders in Del Mar say enough to those ignoring the rules, putting others at risk. Here's KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman.
The governor has asked all of the agencies to be proactive and to take the health orders seriously. And so we are doing what our state has asked us to do.
Del Mar is beefing up enforcement and education of COVID-19 rules.
We're going to do that with extra patrol from the sheriff in our public spaces along Camino Del Mar and our parks and beaches.
Part of a new pilot program, deputies will be hitting areas with lots of people like Del Mar's beaches. Downtown Del Mar will also be part of this new targeted enforcement. Basically, the way the pilot program works is over the next 4 months, the city will get to decide when and where to use these additional sheriff's deputies. Everyone on the council agrees face coverings are important to slow the virus's spread, but not everyone likes the idea of hiring deputies to make sure people are following the rules.
I voted no to spend $22,000 on 8 hours a week of very expensive sheriff time and precious time.
Del Mar Deputy Mayor Terry Gasterland was the lone no vote and is worried about unintended consequences.
If Del Mar develops a reputation for, hey, you go to Del Mar, you're not wearing your mask, you'll get a ticket, you got to go to court, you got to pay that $1,000 fine, that could have negative consequences if we're the only city doing it. I think it'll have a potential negative effect on our businesses.
Others believe it will have a positive effect.
I think our businesses will appreciate the support and the desire that our council has to keep our community safe, because when people feel safe here, they'll go out of their homes, they'll go to the businesses, they'll go to the restaurants.
The idea is to focus enforcement on face coverings, but deputies can issue citations for any violations under state and county orders. They carry up to $1,000 fine and/or up to 90 days in jail.
Citing and fining it's a little much. I mean, if the fine was, maybe $50.
The sheriff's department says they strive for voluntary compliance first, and most people will put on a face covering if they have to.
The more people can get away from treating this like it's a political issue, the better. It needs to be thought of as on a scientific basis and not as a political, emotional basis.
This new pilot program runs through the end of November. Part of its $22,000 price tag includes adding more signage about face coverings around the city. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Some California elementary schools could reopen for in-person learning if they meet new guidelines to apply for a waiver. But there are concerns about safety and equity. Waivers are discouraged from being granted in areas where the infection rate is more than twice the threshold for being placed on the state monitoring list. The president of Chula Vista Educators says with the South Bay's high rates, there is little chance any schools in the area would qualify. She says the safety guidelines are easier for small private schools to meet because of their flexibility to limit enrollment and more resources.
Because there's inequity and unfairness in education, public education right now. And with the forces that are trying to dismantle public education, it's only going to make it worse.
To apply for a waiver, schools must submit a plan at least 2 weeks in advance of their desired reopening date. Plans must include testing and how they would handle outbreaks and closures. Districts would also have to talk to teachers' unions. Right now, the country is in a new phase of the COVID crisis, with members of the coronavirus task force warning the pandemic is getting worse. But as Whitney Wild reports, the president is praising his administration's actions.
From the cities to the suburbs, in rural areas, COVID-19 is more widespread in the United States than ever before. But in an interview with Axios, President Trump claims,
I think it's under control. I'll tell you what.
How? 1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is. But that doesn't mean we aren't doing everything we can. It's under control as much as you can control it.
the United States leads the world in COVID-19 cases and deaths. President Trump blames the high case count on the high testing rate.
We have tested more people than any other country. And, you know, there are those that say, you can test too much. You do know that.
Who says that?
Oh, just read the manuals, read the books.
Manuals?
Read the
What
books.
manuals?
Read the books.
What books?
Critics point to the president and say he should have done more, like mandating masks nationally or encouraging states to stay closed to stop or slow the spread of the virus.
He's shown that he can't beat the pandemic and keep you safe.
President Trump is now promoting the use of masks, but as the death toll continues to rise, the president says his administration saved lives.
One person is too much. We would have lost millions of people. And those people that really understand it, they said it's incredible the job that we've done.
At the White House, I'm Whitney Wild reporting.
The U.S. Census Bureau will now end its counting efforts on September 30th, a month earlier than previously announced. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler tells us this puts local census efforts already constrained by the pandemic under even more pressure to get the count done quickly and accurately.
Originally, the count was supposed to end in July, but in April, the official census count was extended to October 31st to help census takers accommodate for social distancing during the coronavirus pandemic. On Monday, however, the Census Bureau announced that it would be cutting the counting a month short. Local organizations have been pushing for an accurate count to make sure federal funding gets to under-resourced areas. Now they're redoubling their efforts to get the word out about the census.
We still have a good foundation, and we have been putting in the work for quite a really long time, and so hopefully our communities will deliver.
Brenda Diaz is the Civic Engagement Coordinator at Mid-City Can, which has been spearheading census efforts in City Heights. Right now, that neighborhood self-response rate is at 59.5%, with government census takers set to visit homes that haven't responded yet starting next week. For Diaz, the stakes of an undercount, especially during a pandemic, couldn't be higher.
So we're talking about trillions of dollars, right? If our communities are not counted, it's $1 trillion over the next 10 years, which we won't have for healthcare, which is currently really important, emergency services, education, or like even school meals for the future generations.
The Census Bureau says it pushed the date back to make sure all data collection is completed by the end of the year. But Diaz and other local groups working on census efforts in San Diego County believe it's an effort to purposefully drive down participation in immigrant communities.
We're used to, being disenfranchised and having to move fast, and hopefully we'll be able to make sure that we get an accurate count.
Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
The country of Lebanon is dealing with catastrophe after a massive explosion leveled the port in its capital city. Video from Beirut shows the blast. 70 people are dead, 3,000 wounded. Beirut's hospitals were already struggling to keep pace with the coronavirus before today's disaster. Late word from the Prime Minister's office says a storage of ammonium nitrate in a building for 6 years may have ignited the blast. An undersea search and rescue vessel has found the amphibious assault vehicle that sank near San Clemente Island. The Navy is working to recover the bodies of the 8 Marines and 1 sailor aboard the vehicle. 7 members of the Camp Pendleton-based crew survived the training accident. 2 are in the hospital. Governor Gavin Newsom ordered that flags at the state capitol be flown at half-staff today in honor of the service members who died. After making landfall in North Carolina, Isaias is rocketing up the northeast. And as Camila Bernal explains, millions are under tropical storm warnings.
On the East Coast, Isaias had more than 100 million people under a tropical storm warning.
We hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
The storm is expected to bring strong wind gusts of more than 60 miles per hour for major Northeast metro areas. Forecasted winds in New York City could be the strongest the city has seen since Superstorm Sandy in 2012.
Everyone take this very seriously. Between the rain, flooding potential, the winds, even again potential tornado, that's a lot.
Tornadoes are a huge concern. At least 20 were reported between North Carolina and New Jersey Tuesday morning.
It's nothing there. You can look across the field, you can actually see the frame of a mobile home across the field. Vehicles are turned over, vehicles are piled up on top of each other. It's just very sad.
On Maryland's eastern shore, a suspected tornado caused widespread damage. Another touching down near Ocean City, New Jersey. And tornado warnings also issued for the Philadelphia and New York metro area.
That is such a rarity here in New York City. It may sound to some people like that's not something to worry about. It is something to worry about.
Camila Bernal, KPBS News.
Southern California fire officials say the wildfire burning through the San Bernardino National Forest was started by sparks coming from a vehicle tailpipe. The flames from the so-called Apple Fire have scorched more than 42 square miles and are still threatening homes. CAL FIRE's Thomas Schutz says San Diego firefighters are helping out.
The one fortunate part about that is it's moving away from the residents. We do have some communities out in front of it, which we are concerned about, but we've stacked those areas with resources to make sure that that they're protected.
This is the biggest wildfire in Southern California this season. Statewide, CAL FIRE has battled more than 4,200 fires since the beginning of the year.
Well, we're seeing a little more comfort roll into the forecast here as temperatures back down ever so slightly from day to day. It is Wednesday and Thursday becoming a little less hot. It'll become a little breezy in this transition, and fire danger is still a concern. It's not too high, but there are elevated concerns associated with fire danger, especially across the interior. We're keeping an eye on some of the large ongoing wildfires in the Golden State to our north and east. Tonight, we're looking at temperatures down into the low to mid 60s from El Cajon to San Diego, but low 50s in Ramona, and Borrego Springs welcomes the 70s back into the overnight forecast, but we're back up to 107 during the day tomorrow. Lots of sunshine, some coastal clouds. It'll be a classic August day in Southern California with cool air near the coast and hot weather across the interior. It is becoming breezy, so that is our concern. Nice cooler air up to the north into the Central Valley and parts of the San Joaquin Valley as well. Into the latter part of the week, we stay dry, and it'll be breezy into Thursday. Winds will subside some into Friday. As we look at our details here for the coast, mid-70s for the next 5 days. It looks pretty nice. Some morning clouds, lots of afternoon sunshine. We will look forward to that. Into the interior, here we're dealing with highs in the low 80s still on Wednesday. A little warm, but we'll back down into the upper 70s. A cooler Thursday, just a little breezy out there, and temperatures will rebound back into the mid 80s, so moderate warmth out there for Saturday and Sunday with some low clouds in the western parts of the interior, almost to the coast. Into the mountains we go, and we bottom out on Thursday with a high of 70. That'll be nice. Upper 40s for the lows for one night, then back into the 50s for lows and mid to upper 70s for highs. A good deal of sunshine. Nice time for a hike. Just be safe. If you're going to be camping, be very wise with any fire danger concerns. In the deserts, we dropped out to 102 on a cooler, still hot, but less hot, Thursday, then back up to 110 into Sunday. I'm meteorologist Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
Today, the San Diego City Council voted to allocate $700,000 to help hard-hit businesses in historically underserved communities. The money is from the city's Small Business Relief Fund, which includes CARES Act money. More than 1,200 businesses have received support from the fund, but concerns were raised that it has mostly benefited those with more resources. The city is reaching out to Black, Latino, and Asian-owned businesses about relief programs through the city, county, state, or through nonprofits. The review website Yelp estimates some 29,000 California businesses on its site have closed since the pandemic started, more than half for good. Many others are struggling to stay afloat. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman introduces us to a business owner in La Jolla who says she's trying to keep the lost art of alterations alive.
The simplest button, to the most ornate wedding dress, we do it all. This is our livelihood, and my mom started it 30 years ago. I don't want to close, and it's going to be the last resort.
Kiki's Alterations was started by now 83-year-old Kiki Spounias, who came to the United States after growing up in Greece.
I learned from Greece the tailoring. I'm very happy what I'm doing.
A lot of our clients, we actually are doing their grandkids.
Kiki's daughter Tammy has taken over majority of the responsibilities.
And now I'm more easier. I work less, I come late, I leave early.
When the pandemic first hit, Kiki shut down for 3 months.
March, April, May, busiest season. May is the biggest. That's where I make most of my income.
And you were totally closed?
We were closed, yeah.
Since reopening in June, business has been down nearly 75%.
Where income doesn't pay the rent, but I do stay open because I don't want to lose my customer base. I want to let them know that I'm here, that I'm open, that I'm ready to do work. It's just no one's traveling, no one's going anywhere.
The business did get a PPP loan, which helped cover some expenses, and the owners are applying for a county relief grant. But the possibility of closing is something weighing heavily on everyone.
Oh yeah, very much so. And sometimes I cannot sleep and I'm thinking what's going to happen the next day. Then I call Tammy. Anybody came? We have any business? Oh, Mommy, don't worry. 1 people came or 2 people came. She's excited. She's getting married. Very soon.
I do have some weddings, and which is a great treat for me.
Yeah.
Okay. I came in for my second fitting and getting ready for my wedding August 22nd, so it's coming up.
Allie Fauner and her fiance David Adams had been planning a nearly 200-person wedding for more than a year.
Yeah, it was gonna be the whole ordeal, but had to make the tough decision just to push it off for a little bit.
Now the couple is opting for a small backyard ceremony with plans for a bigger bash sometime next year.
It's different, but a lot of us are in the same boat, so yeah, it's been good.
Tammy says the majority of her clients have opted to delay their weddings, while others are going smaller.
Less groomsmen, less bridesmaids, where we get a lot of the business through the bridesmaids. And if less people are going, they're not as formal.
The pandemic has brought some other changes too. Some consultations are now done over video chat, and Tammy has pivoted to making face coverings. She says she can make them out of almost any material.
I've made masks for brides, so I use some of the fabric from their wedding dress to make them a matching mask.
With no signs of coronavirus slowing down, Kiki's has some tough months ahead of them, but they're just hoping that the whole industry, tailoring and alterations, can survive the pandemic.
There is a need for alterations. I think I just have to, stick it out probably another year, and hopefully we'll have some funding and to keep going, to keep it open, because tailor shops are needed. The clothes aren't going to mend themselves. It's a lost art.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The way San Diego County cares for its jail inmates could soon change. Today, the Board of Supervisors voted 4-1 to consider outsourcing some services to private companies. Nathan Fletcher was the only one opposed. Today's vote simply instructs the Health and Human Services Agency to develop a plan for both in-house and private care. It would still need to be reviewed by Sheriff Bill Gore. San Diego scientists are growing mini lungs from a diverse set of stem cells to see how COVID-19 impacts the organ. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani explains.
Researchers collected stem cells from people with different racial and gender backgrounds and then grew these organoids, or small functioning organs, in petri dishes. Here you can see some tiny breathing lungs. Federal data show coronavirus disproportionately impacts people of color and men, says UC San Diego neonatologist Sandra Leibel.
What they're finding is the patients that are the sickest, there's this lung disease that patients end up on the ventilator, and it's called ARDS. And those patients that end up with ARDS and get really sick and need hospitalization as well as ventilator support are people that come from various ethnic backgrounds. backgrounds, mainly Latino and African American as well. And that's why we want to use our mini lungs in order to understand why this is happening.
Sanford Burnham-Prebys Medical Discovery Institute biologist Evan Snyder says they are exposing the mini lungs to coronavirus and a number of promising antiviral drugs. That's not only to show biologically why the disparity exists, but also whether certain antivirals could be tweaked to help different people more effectively.
If we validated these drugs in a clinically relevant system and we saw a difference, we could just compensate for that by changing dose or dosing regime, so that anything that we discovered should be applicable to all patients across the board.
Researchers say they are now collecting the data and are also planning to look at how the virus may impact mini brains. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
We just got new numbers from the county on the coronavirus crisis. 3 more people have died from the virus and 290 new cases have been reported. We're expecting an update from county officials tomorrow afternoon.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on COVID relief as Congress struggles to make a deal. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The warming climate is putting environmental pressure on California forests that have towered over the Golden State for thousands of years. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson says underwater forests are also facing challenges from the heat.
Ed Parnell didn't have to walk far from San Diego Scripps Pier to find strands of giant kelp washed up on the beach.
The root system is called the holdfast that holds the kelp plant to the bottom. Right there you can see that.
They really aren't roots. The Scripps Institution of Oceanography biologist says that's how the algae stays anchored to the ocean floor.
Basically, it puts out these stipes, and each individual stipe puts out these blades that then make it up to the surface for it to photosynthesize.
Small gas-filled bubbles carry the long stems to the surface where the blades can soak up the sunshine. Parnell says giant kelp can grow up to 2 feet a day, making it one of the fastest growing living things on the planet.
The canopy depends on how much hard bottom is located at depth. Here off San Diego, we have the 2 largest kelp forests off the west coast because we have hard bottom that the kelp can attach to over large areas.
Underwater, the giant kelp forests off the coast of La Jolla and Point Loma can be spectacular. Biologists have compared them to an underwater forest of sequoias, but unlike the giant trees, kelp grows fast and dies fast. These young kelp that were videotaped just off the shores of San Diego are already reaching skyward in the cool Pacific Ocean. Plants can quickly reach lengths of 100 feet, but their lifespan is pretty short in this vital but delicate ecosystem. Parnell says the kelp provide food and habitat.
The bottom hosts a lot of habitat for species that live in the kelp forest over their entire lifetime.
Parnell says giant kelp in San Diego is under siege. Storms and sea urchins have taken a toll, but the potentially more devastating issue is heat. That's on full display at the end of Scripps Pier, where Sean Bruce was one of many people who performed a daily ritual.
So this is one of the longest data sets, ongoing data sets in history.
He's taking temperature readings of the ocean, and those daily temperature readings show that the ocean has been warming here since the mid-1970s. Temperatures hit a sustained peak in 2015 and 2016, and then set records just 2 years later. The heat is devastating for the fast-growing kelp. Parnell shared a video of a rocky, barren seabed near La Jolla that has yet to recover from those heat waves. It's a rocky area that should be full of kelp. And the problem is not limited to Southern California.
Australia, Tasmania, especially up in New England, also in Europe. And so it's a phenomenon that is affecting these ecosystems in both northern and southern hemispheres.
Mark Carr studies evolutionary biology at UC Santa Cruz.
As the water temperature increased along the coastline, one of the consequences that warm water temperature has is it reduces the nutrient availability to the algae in shallower waters. And you see this, for example, down in Southern California, when we have these El Nino events and the surface waters warm up, you'll notice how the kelp forests tend to die back.
Southern California kelp are not yet at the point where they're struggling to survive, but the iconic underwater habitat is at risk. Climate science predicts oceans will continue to warm, and data confirms that the trend has been underway for some time.
The concern is whether we're now going to start to experience more and more of these heat waves over time, and whether they become more intense.
Scripps researcher Ed Parnell says the iconic kelp may already be in trouble, and that could have a dramatic impact on the region's nearshore habitat.
They host, hundreds of species themselves, and they provide shelter, habitat, and food for many, many species. So if the kelp forest itself goes away, the kelps, then a lot of those species are going to be either less abundant, or the food structure of that whole community is going to change.
And losing the kelp forest will make the ocean a little less appealing to humans who dive in the underwater forests. That will remove a small slice of the state's coastal tourism economy. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.